I'm Amy Myers-Jaffe. I am the director of the Baker Institute Energy Forum. I welcome you all here today for this excellent lecture event. Welcome to the Baker Institute for Public Policy. We are very pleased to have today, straight from the Offshore Technology Conference, Minister Landau, and I'm going to introduce him now. Over the last few years, major natural gas discoveries have been made in Israel that have been labeled inside and outside Israel as game-changing. The opportunities for Israel to produce all of its energy needs and potentially become a major exporter will be a major contribution to Israel's national security. In the Middle East, nothing is ever simple, and these spectacular discoveries are going to raise some major policy challenges, some of them logistical, and some of them geopolitical. Choices will need to be made about the kinds of infrastructure that will best suit both the economic conditions and the security priorities of Israel. In the context of this dynamic change and event, and in the context of somewhat chaotic regional context, the Honorable Uzi Landau, Minister of Energy and Water Resources, has been instrumental in forging a new direction for Israel's energy policy. He has shown tremendous foresight, navigating on the one hand the complex geopolitics surrounding the supply arrangements and deals needed to meet the gas needs of Israel today, and on the other hand, looking forward at the even more complex factors surrounding the ins and outs of the options for development of pipelines, floating LNG terminals, potential joint ventures, and other incentives for oil and gas development in Israel. Minister Landau is committed to ensure that Israel is prepared for an energy-independent, globally significant future. The minister and I have this common ambition that we'd both like to see our own respective countries have a secure energy future. In the case of Israel, I can definitely use the word energy independence. In the United States, maybe that's a more controversial terminology, but we have this in common. And we have another common achievement that many of you probably don't know. We both have daughters who are engineers, and this is a big source of pride. And it's particularly an honor for me since we're speaking here at Rice University, where over half of our engineering majors here on campus are women. So let me tell you a little bit about Minister Landau. He was appointed to his current position in 2009. He has been an important member of the Knesset since 1984 and has had many central positions in the Israeli cabinet, including, most importantly, the Minister of Public Security from March 2001 to February 2002, and as a minister in the Prime Minister's office from February 2002 to October 2004. He has served as the chairman of the Knesset delegation to the European Parliament, and is also, historically, big accomplishment and important for us here at the Baker Institute for those accomplishments, a member of the delegation to the Madrid Peace Conference in 1991. He's a prolific author for topics ranging from foreign policy, strategic and security affairs to transport planning, and we are honored to have him with us today. Let me welcome, please, the Honorable Uzi Landau.
Thank you very much, Amy. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming down here this evening. It is my special honor and privilege to be here this evening with you and perhaps bring with me some information, explanation as to what's happening in Israel with respect to the energy sector, and of course, how can that be seen within the overall perspective of the Middle East. But perhaps first, some kind of perspective about the Arab world and Israel that we can see over there. We see the Arab world stretching from the Atlantic to the Persian Gulf, and I would say, and beyond. There are two mistakes. First, Turkey is Muslim, it's not Arab. Ethiopia is also not Muslim, and I mean it's Christian, and definitely it's not Arab. Iran, which is not marked over there, is non-Arab, but is Muslim Shiite, but it's part of this entire game that we see in here. There is something which is characterizing this entire area, which is now captured within a tremendous earthquake. And Israel is just over there. It's hardly seen. And just to perhaps shed some more light, let me see. This is Israel. That's the tiny spot that we saw before. And what we see in there is this is the Gaza Strip, or the Gaza area, which is now controlled by the Hamas. And this is Judea and Samaria, referred here as the West Bank. And this is what previously used to be a part of Jordan between 47 and 67, which the Palestinians demand to have that now, just to start with and going on during their negotiation. Now, having said that, I'd like simply to go on for a kind of a short, well, this I'll refer to the end, just to try and draw your attention to the most eastern corner of the Middle East. That's the basin over there of the Mediterranean. Over there we see Cyprus. This is Israel here. Lebanon is up there, and Egypt is just here. This is the Sinai. Now, the reason I'm showing this is simply because this entire area has underwent a major change over the past 10 years, in particular over the past 3 years. Since the year of 1955, Israel is trying to explore and find natural gas and oil, you just name it. We just did a triple here, I mean, just nothing there. But in the year of 2004, Noble Energy, let's see, Chuck Davidson, good afternoon. The chairman of Noble Energy, who is generous with us to be this evening here, found off the coast of Israel, off the coast of Ashdod, the Meribah deposit, which is up to 30 BCM. It's good to have. It's a medium-sized kind of a thing. It's a small size. For Israel's proportion, it's good. But since then, when I entered office, this was in the year of 2009, we found something which is bigger, which is called Tamar, which is somewhere over there, off the coast of Haifa. And about a year and a half later, we found something which is much, much bigger, which is called Leviathan, that has been the largest of its kind over the past decade. Basically, what we see in this particular area is the potential, and the potential which is assessed by the U.S. Geological Society and was put on their magazine, is that we have over there around 122 trillion CF, which is 3,500 BCM, I think, in terms of BCMs. What we do see is that the total value of what we have over there is $700 billion. Now, what is assumed that Israel has in it is around 40% of all of this quantity. Now, it's around 1,400 to 1,500 BCM, what has been found until now in these two large fields. One is Tamar, and the other one is Leviathan, is around 750. Let me just see what we're going to have there. Yeah. What we see, perhaps I'll go one step further. If we see Cyprus over there, this is the coast of Israel, all of the dashed area are all of the permits and licenses that have been issued for people, for different firms for exploration. This is the Tamar field of around 250 BCM. This is the Leviathan of around 450 BCM. The important thing to note is that what we have already found in these two places suffices for Israel's needs for the next 50 to 60, perhaps more years, just for our own needs. But as you can see, there is more perhaps to come. And what we see in this dashed, well, not exactly red, but kind of between red and brown area are the economic zone of Cyprus, where they have already issued a number of licenses. And the one which is closest to us, that's the one which they call Block 12. Around 150 BCM have already been found lately. And there is another part that we have here, run by Pelagic, which has, so it seems, a joint structure over there to be developed by the Cypriots and ourselves. Now, I mention all of that because this draws this entire area to some kind of a different, perhaps, future. Lebanon has something off its coast and is already showing some interest in trying to develop these places. Syria, which is here, is now occupied in other issues. Cyprus is very active. We are very active, and we are cooperating our activities with Cyprus. Now, the issue is, of course, what do we do with this gas? It's do we keep it on all? Do we export it all? Or what's going to be the working point for how many years are we going to keep it for our own needs, and how much shall we export? Well, there is now a high-level government committee nominated by the Prime Minister Netanyahu, and myself, and chaired by the Director General of my ministry, and they have come with a draft report with the recommendations as to what they think we should do. It is up now for a hearing where all of the industry people and others are going to provide their comments to it, and then we'll reshape it and come with a final report, and the government will sit and decide upon it. Now, here I hear today in the news that we are going to have election by September 1st. So in all probability, the government that perhaps will deal with exactly shaping this policy is going to be the next government, but I'm quite confident that this will be one of the most important issues that the next government will deal with, at least before I'm leaving this office. I'll do whatever possible to prepare whatever is necessary for the next decision makers, just to arrive at a quick decision, because I think what is highly important is not just if we should have this or other decision. Certainty is the name of the game, and the industry should know what is ahead of them. But basically, I guess what we should do is first draw your attention to some of the characteristics. What we see here is this Tamar field, which I mentioned. Here we have the Leviathan. Tamar is now is undergoing a kind of a crash program to connect it to the mainland through connecting it to the installations of the Mary B, present well, which is to be depleted shortly. And from there, they're going to be connected to the Israeli network pipeline, which is sparse. This project is to be completed by the first quarter of next year. This shows us something with respect to our energy security isn't really in place. One of the major things our government is going to look for is just to try and see what additional 2 entries we are going to have on the northern part of Israel shore. And the committee, which I mentioned before, has already in it a recommendation that a specific committee chaired by the Prime Minister's office will look to it to expedite this thing. This, in our eyes, is something which is of highest importance. We cannot allow ourselves to depend just on one pipeline connecting Israel to its oil wells, and basically a decision that will definitely be taken is that every well that will be discovered and operated will be connected to the Israeli shore. Now, we view all of that as a major opportunity, an historical opportunity on our part. Just to note, about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, in the year of 2004, we have used zero gas to produce electricity. Today, given the gas, if it were available, we have already produced 40% of our electricity based on natural gas. And if this continues, we are assuming that we shall produce until the end of this decade around 60 to 70, perhaps more percentage of our electricity based on natural gas. But at the same time, we'll need to back it up, which will mostly be done by coal that has already been our major source of electricity production, and together going along with crude oil. There is also much effort which is put into the development of renewable energy, mostly solar, and by the end of this decade, we are about to have around 3,000 megawatts on top of what we've had, which will be 10% of what we consume. So just to sum it up, leaving the issue of export for a minute that I'll come back to again, we are going to have here 2 more entries. We are going to have more of an elaborate pipeline system. We shall connect all of the oil wells that will be developed in the future to the mainland. And we will now see how much export we are going to have. And we are going to have export. The level of export, given now the 750 BCM, will be at least 300 BCM. And again, it is all still pending final recommendation of this committee and a decision by the government, but definitely there will be export. Once we are going to have export, there are 2 major issues to be discussed. One, with an LNG facility onshore and an onshore LNG facility that is going usually to involve major statutory problems in Israel because our shore is already packed with many installations. And there is this kind of a very delicate equilibrium, working point that we have to find between our environmental needs, about our need to have open space, our need to have vegetation and wildlife, whatever you need, and we also, of course, need to have those infrastructure installations. One possibility could be somewhere here, so people argue. Another possibility is to have it perhaps here on the Red Sea, not far from the city of Eilat. But again, all of these things are now going to be under close study that will take place in the immediate future. Another possibility is, of course, to have it all done through an FLNG. That is a floating one, but this technology, well, we're still waiting to see who else is going to use it, so that we shall not be the first in that direction. Another issue is, of course, export to whom, to where. Our immediate concern is, of course, to export it to our immediate neighbors. That is to the Palestinians and to the Jordanians. We think that our neighbors who are living here and our neighbors who are living there, I guess, could rely, if they choose to get it from us, they could rely on inexpensive and a reliable source of energy. Just a note, the Jordanians used to get, and still do, their natural gas from Egypt, but it has been disrupted a number of times. The agreement between them and Egypt has been opened, and the supply to them is unreliable. With us, things will be reliable, and from our point of view, it is highly important to supply our neighbors with reliable gas, because we think in this wild Middle East, sometimes in the future, as we wish to have peace, it will be built step by step. It's not going to be kind of a quick thing. And we wish to build this kind of many facets of day-to-day routine life, day-to-day coexisting measures or ways of coexisting that neighbors have to go along with, that eventually will develop more and more faith and will make it possible for us to more easily come to peace agreements. At the same time, we are having negotiations with the Cypriots to try and see what kind of future joint projects we could have with them. And things are now, as I mentioned, under negotiation between them with respect to the unification agreement between them and us. Another point which is of interest is that there is now underway a feasibility study in the development of an electricity cable between Israel, well, I hardly see this green point. Is that seen over there? Well, there is an electricity cable which is now under study to connect Israel to Cyprus. Now, for us, it's important because we are an energy island. We are not connected to any of our neighbors, and in times of a shortage or a power failure, we just have to rely upon ourselves to straighten that out. So it's important to us to be connected to somebody else. And this cable is also important for Cyprus. That is, we'll be able to back up each other. And there is another point important in there, is that Cyprus is now also negotiating. So it says already signed an agreement to develop a electricity cable between Cyprus to Greece via Crete. Now, once all of that is done through, this means that Israel will be connected to the European Union. This will be important for us, not just to be able and be provided with more of a reliable backup, but given enough gas, we shall also be able, if circumstances will make it attractive, to also sell electricity to Europe with this natural gas. And we think that the crazy Middle East that we are now at, and we can see what's going in there, this axis between Israel, Cyprus, and Greece, developing on that economic levels, would provide some kind of an anchor of stability in the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. One more thing which I believe is important to note as to what we're going to do with this natural gas is we are now examining two things. First of all, is this going to provide us with the ability to develop a chemical industry based on natural gas as raw material? And the second thing, which we are now looking into and hoping to have some more concrete results by this coming fall, is how are we going to use this natural gas for alternative oil and transportation. That is, we are now looking into perhaps the use of natural gas to produce GTL or CNG, that's compressed natural gas, or the production of methanol in order to replace gasoline in our transportation market. Well, that's basically what we see as good uses of this natural gas. I wouldn't say that this is going to make Israel energy independent. In this more complex world we are in, I don't think that any country is independent at all, but we shall be definitely much, much less dependent than what we have been until now, as all of our energy sources have been imported from abroad. Now we are using much more from our own economic zones and territory. Another story that touches upon Israeli natural gas, that is, natural gas bought by Israel, but bought from Egypt. And Egyptian natural gas has been flowing to Israel since the year of 2008. We have seen that agreement that was commercially done as perhaps the most important economic derivative from the peace agreement that we have signed with Egypt. We have seen the peace agreement with Egypt as the most important anchor for peace, for future peace in the Middle East. In fact, the peace with Jordan followed a number of years later on, and we thought that perhaps more agreements will be signed based on that. But we saw what happened. A few days after Egypt was drawn into this turmoil, and as a variation of the Arab Spring, this pipeline providing us with Egyptian natural gas was bombed. And as of then, it has been bombed 14 additional times, as if just one time is insufficient. Today, when you listen, not just to those terror organizations which were behind it, but also to the political discourse, to the language used by the leading competitors for Egyptian presidency, these things are quite a matter of concern for us, because without exception, openly they all speak about the need, some say, the need to stop the flow of natural gas to Israel altogether. The more moderates among them, for example, Amr Moussa, who was once their foreign minister and now the Secretary General of the Arab League, is saying that this agreement will have to undergo major changes. They also speak about changing the peace agreement that we have with Israel. This entire atmosphere for us is a measure of concern. We will not be prepared, of course, for that. We think that an agreement that has been signed must be respected. In fact, the natural gas agreement we had with the Egyptians has already been opened a couple of years ago. They said that what they get over there is something which is too low. We sat with them, we negotiated with them. I say we, I mean the firms, the Israel Electric Company that bought it, negotiated it with them. The price was higher to levels which are, I understand, above what is paid here in the US stock exchange. But on any event, now we listen to additional talks as if this should be opened once again. We shall not open this agreement once again. We wish to see the present agreement being carried out to its spirit and to its letter. And we wish to continue and see all of that structure back on commercial tracks. I would add to suggest, when we see what is happening there, that what is happening in Egypt with respect to the natural gas is basically resembling what is happening in this entire area, that is in the entire area which stretches from over there, the Atlantic, to the Persian Gulf, and here we have Pakistan and Afghanistan over there. All that area is very much like in Egypt, is drawn into a political and cultural reality where this more radical part of Islam is already having more and more influence. While in Egypt, it all started by many who came to the Tahrir square, because they wanted to have a better future. They wanted to have Egypt that enjoys democracy and a different type of life. This was how it started. Now we had election as first step of a democratic route, and what happened was that the Muslim extremists, that is the Muslim Brotherhood, and the more extremists, that's the Salafist, received over 70% of the vote. And we speak about Egypt, which is the most, I would say, homogeneous Arab country. Just to note, President Sadat of Egypt, right after the peace agreement signed with Israel, was told that the Israelis are so happy, and they say about this agreement that they successfully signed an agreement with the strongest and most important Arab country. Sadat said, no, Egypt is not the most important and strongest Arab country, it's the only Arab country. All the rest are tribes with flags. Now, I think this is a tragedy, because this entire area is very much fractured. It's very much split. You strike an agreement with someone, you don't know who's going to be, that's going to follow. And we, in democracies, when we sign an agreement, you sign an agreement with the people. So the regime which follows respects this agreement. Now, what was happening is, well, in Libya or in Tunisia, we had this change of power with election. Those who came to the power were the Muslim Brotherhood people. In Libya, a country which is still torn apart in kind of a civil war between the many tribes, the one who led this of the interim government over there, in his first appearance said that the law of Libya is going to be the Sharia law. And the leader of the Muslim Brotherhood of Libya once said that they are going to get to power with democracy. He said democracy is like slippers that you use in order to get to the bathroom, and then you take it off. We do see how Muslim Brotherhood do get to power in a very shrewd manner, using the system. So we see what was happening in Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt. We see what is happening in Yemen. We see what's happening in Syria. We see what was happening in Bahrain. And short of intervention of Saudi Arabia, this place would have, I'm afraid, follow the same fate that Tunisia and Libya and Egypt did. And let's not forget, Iran, which is here, is meddling with its finger in all of these huge areas. And while it is paying a certain price in Syria and in Lebanon, which are basically Iranian, definitely Syria, Iranian satellites, in all of the other areas, the Iranians are trying to rock the boat as much as they can. But basically what is happening over there is this type of a Middle Eastern crossroad where we, of course, would like to see this entire area coming into a better future, into a democratic future in the end. But when you come to election, we already have had this very bitter experience of 1979 in Iran, where through election, those who came to power were the Ayatollah Khomeini people. Perhaps one note about Turkey, which is not Arab, but which is Muslim, but that used to be a secular country, but also through election, democratic election, it is a Muslim Brotherhood type of party that came to power, headed by Mr. Erdogan, and slowly, gradually, they're moving and changing their strategy towards being linked more and more to the world of Islam and to the Arab world. They're distancing themselves from Europe. They're getting closer to Iran. They're openly and publicly supporting the Hamas terror organization, the Hezbollah terror organization. About a year and a half ago, they also ran some joint Air Force maneuvers with the Chinese. And I'm just wondering, when I entered my office, the previous infrastructure minister, energy and water resources, energy, a good friend of mine, Mr. Ben Eliezer, had this idea of perhaps developing an energy corridor between Turkey and Israel that would provide us with perhaps a constant supply of oil and of natural gas. Well, what would happen to this corridor today with Turkey and its own policy? I say all of that because there are some lessons that we have, in my opinion, to draw of this. First of all, about this Middle East. Given the earthquake, we should perhaps still not be surprised if there will be some aftershocks. The story in Syria hasn't ended. I wish countries like Jordan, like Saudi Arabia, like Bahrain, like the Gulf Emirates to continue and be stable and safe and solid. But we know that there are some undercurrents which are taking place over there with the assistance of Iran. Iran itself, as much as it was damaged with what was happening in Syria, is a country that relatively, because of the weakness of this entire Arab world, feels more secured, has gained in itself confidence. And the very basic characteristic of this Middle East is that it is going to be uncertain. In the future, we hold our breath. We don't know where this future will take us to, but we always keep in our mind that this Middle East is not Central Europe. We don't have over there neighbors like you have in North America. It's a place where human lives don't mean much. Human rights are something not to be honored. Signed agreement. Well, agreements aren't signed in this area to be respected as an end in itself, but rather as means to reach other ends. This entire Middle East, like the West and the United States, less and less. And I don't think there is any place that one can rely on any agreement that one is today signing with a country that is now in internal turmoil. Israel's president, Mr. Perez, once said that the number of agreements violated in the Middle East is equal to the number of agreements signed in the Middle East. Now, this isn't to say that we shouldn't say agreements, but we should always take every agreement with a grain of salt. We should take to our attention the fact that if an agreement goes wrong, the price that we should pay shouldn't be too high. And of course, the supply of oil from this Middle East in the future is not going to be more secure than what it has been already until now. Perhaps one comment about a country like Iran. Can I still have 5 minutes, or should I? I do, thanks. Well, I promised to you before that I'm not going to speak more than 20 minutes. But you approach promised by a politician as something that should be. Okay. But I'll try to do. On any event, if you think I've gone a little too much, don't raise first a yellow card as a referee does. Just take immediately the red card, and I'll understand very well. On any event, perhaps a couple of more words about Iran. Iran is a country. It's a rogue state. It brutalizes its own people. It promotes and supports attacks against the U.S. in Iraq, in Afghanistan. They are close allies of Syria. They are involved in what's happening now in Syria. They are behind not just the Hamas and Hezbollah terror organizations in the Middle East, but they are sponsoring terror all over the world. Now, Iran has had this audacity until now just to do all of these things all over the world, including the attempt on the life of the Saudi ambassador here in Washington. But Iran is using terror to promote its political and ideological objectives. In the short run, it develops non-conventional capabilities to promote the very same objectives into the future. Now, once Iran becomes nuclear, and Iran is able to provide an umbrella, a backup to terror organizations, it's quite clear that there will be more terror in the future than before they had it. They will allow themselves to do things that until now perhaps they were hesitant to do. One thing with respect to energy, not very many people in my country doubt that once Iran is becoming nuclear, the price of oil will not remain on the level of $100 per barrel as it is today. It will jump dramatically up. And this is perhaps on the economic level, not to speak on the geopolitical arena, one of the major effects of Iran becoming nuclear. I do not, well, I will mention perhaps those additional scenarios of perhaps what will happen if Iran will just put an atomic device in one of the many containers on a container ship that will anchor in some of the ports in the world and will submit an offer that cannot be refused. It is something which is going to turn the world to something which is totally different. A terror organization could be given such a device to be used on a truck, anywhere. See, if Iran is going to become nuclear, Turkey cannot allow itself to stay without a bomb. Saudi Arabia cannot allow itself to stay without a bomb. Egypt cannot allow itself to stay without a bomb. In such of an occasion, the world is going to be totally different. Not the Middle Eastern world, but the entire Western world as we know it. There have been attempts to negotiate with the Iranians. It's already taken 6 to 7 years. And the Iranians speak that they wish they are not making any development for military purposes. It is all for peaceful purposes. In fact, they said on one of the occasions that they are developing in all of their installations medical isotopes. Well, you really don't dig some kind of an underground facility under a mountain in order to develop medical isotopes. And you're not going to develop ballistic missiles to put on their warhead medical isotopes. There is something real behind it. Now, these very days, there is also negotiation with the Iranians taking place, and they still speak about peace. We don't see a real concrete outcome coming from these sanctions. But what I believe one really should remember is that in 1938, we had the story about Neville Chamberlain, the Prime Minister of Britain, and Hitler at that time, who said that Czechoslovakia was his last demand. He wants to have peace. Peace in our time. And this was a document that Neville Chamberlain, the late Neville Chamberlain, came down with in London when he landed after the Munich agreement. And he showed it and said, peace in our time. And he said, this is what I've been promised. Now, just before he died, he was quoted to say that, Mr. Chamberlain, that everything would have been better had not Hitler lied to me. And I think that we should not find ourselves in a similar situation in the future. And with respect to all of those who suggest to provide the Iranians with this and that additional perhaps goodie, that this would perhaps change their mind if we shall show them some gestures like throwing many sheep, one after the other, to a hungry wolf in the hope that this will turn it into a vegetarian, I do not accept this particular logic. I think that unless the Iranians understand they will never be made nuclear, as President Obama said, but they have to understand it, and until now they don't. We are going to have, inter alia, also a problem of energy from the Middle East. Perhaps my last point is that simply suggest that Israel is the only corner of stability in this area, the only real ally of the West there in this huge span of territory. I guess even the stability and the safety of allies of the United States, like Jordan, like Saudi Arabia, like the Gulf Emirates, rests on the strength and reliability of Israel. The late Foreign Minister, Secretary of State of the United States, General Haig, once said that Israel is like perhaps a huge Air Force carrier that the United States, I mean the largest one the United States has, and the safest one, that saves the United States to the need to deploy a whole fleet in the eastern basin of the Mediterranean. Now we are doing that because of our own interests, and we feel that we share the same values of the free world. We have similar interests. We are these days exposed to the same threats. We think that this is a time where in this moving sense of the Middle East, the West needs to have a high ground which is solid, that one can defend. And in this Middle East, Israel is a place with a free press, with independent legal system, with open economy, with vigorous, perhaps too vigorous, political discourse, with the right of vote to everyone, even for those who reject the right of Israel to exist amongst our own people. And within Israel, more than 1 million Palestinian Arabs enjoy for all of these rights. Please note, in this entire span that we see there in the Middle East, there are 300 million Arabs. Only the Israeli Arabs enjoy democratic, true rights. Note, less than half of a percentage of Arabs enjoy democratic rights. And I'm proud to say that they are all Israeli citizens. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I've already taken much of your time. Thank you. Questions?
So the minister will take a few questions if we have any questions from the audience.
Can you see developing a domestic oil and gas industry in Israel that would have drilling companies and oil and gas ventures and offshore equipment and all of that?
The answer is yes, of course. It is very much depend on how much we think we shall be able to export.
Yes.
We think that this is a major element over there. But definitely this is what we wish to see, and we would like to see leading firms coming and joining the wagon. Until now, we have to thank Noble Energy for the excellent work that they have been doing in Israel, just putting us on the map. Thank you, sir.
You were talking about oil offshore, like it's a fact. Actually, there is very little oil.
Natural gas. If I said oil, I'm
You mentioned in your talk something about oil. I know that Noble is drilling deeper to find oil in that structure, but has there any signs that there is oil deeper than where the natural gas is?
Well, first of all, let me thank God that we found natural gas. And you see, in all that area, You know, Moses took us down to that area. He knew where to take us to. Because in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in Libya, in Iraq, where you just put your finger in the ground, you got oil over there. In Israel, we drilled, and the only thing that we got are signs. The gentlemen from Noble Energy were the first to prove the case that we have at least natural gas. And there is a good chance to have oil.
I think there is.
So why are you giving me a hard time?
You mentioned it like there is. And I thought maybe there are some things that are not so well published that you know and the general public doesn't.
Sir, if I know something that I do not disclose, if I really want to know what I do around in my ministry, I take the newspapers and I read it.
When I look at the recommendations that were made recently on exporting from Leviathan and keeping a big chunk for domestic use, and think about why strategically it's important for Israel to be an exporter, but all the logistical challenges of putting that onshore in the country, do you think you have enough supply today to be a realistic exporter from Israel? Or does realistic near-term exports, is that contingent on ultimately doing a deal with the Cypriots?
Well, that's one of the dilemmas that we have we have faced. We are going to see to it that we'll have at each point at least 25 years of future supply for Israel needs. And we think that this is a reasonable type of a risk to take upon ourselves. See, perhaps in 30 years from now, 25 years from now, there will be these additional sources of energy that will leave us with all of the natural gas deep in ground, although we could have made some good economic gains out of that. And on top of that, a country, in particular a country with needs that we are, in this Middle East, we need something also for today. Now, it's not an easy answer. It's a real dilemma, but I believe, we are in this direction that we shall, in my opinion, we shall go for export, and as far as I'll be involved in that, definitely this will be the direction. A reasonable and this level of export that is still meaningful, and we still, let's say, speak on the order of 300 BCM, which is meaningful. And hopefully this will be increased with additional findings. So we believe this is a reasonable way to go forward.
As a follow-up, I understand why strategically it's important for Israel to be an exporter, and I can see why the government would want Israel to provide energy to other countries. How do you weigh that with the security or potential security risk of having an onshore LNG facility?
Well, if the onshore LNG facility would be the only facility in Israel under risk, then perhaps your comment is correct. But all of our major facilities, whether it says to be refineries or communication centers, transportation centers, Israel International Airport, the Ben Gurion International Airport, is already within the range of either Hezbollah from Lebanon or from the Gaza Strip of the Hamas in the south. We are now suggested also that perhaps we should hand over some additional ground. Where is it? Let me just see. Okay, and people are now suggesting that we should also relinquish parts of this area that in all probability will make it possible for future terror organizations over there to use short-range Qassam missiles and Katyusha rockets and missiles to cover Israel in its totality with tens of thousands of missiles. It's not an easy kind of a thing, but the issue of of LNG facility isn't different than others. In fact, if it is, well, that's it.
Sir, thank you very much for a very comprehensive overview. One aspect you didn't even glance over, you missed out completely, which was the fact that where Israel's proposed maritime border with Lebanon is...
Israel proposed maritime?
Israel's proposed maritime border with Lebanon is different from Lebanon's proposed maritime border with Israel. And I know the US government is very concerned about this because it thinks that this is give an opportunity for mischief makers to make mischief. How do you see this particular difference being resolved, and how quickly?
One thing I'm really glad about is that the only thing which I didn't disclose and that you got me is this. Okay, the border between, the maritime border between Israel and Lebanon. Now, you see this point over there?
No. Yes.
When Lebanon negotiated its demarcation line between Cyprus, they came to the joint agreement that this should be the most southern point between in the border between Cyprus and Lebanon. Okay, this continues somewhere here. It was negotiated and signed between Cyprus and Lebanon in, I believe, the year 2007. However, it was not verified. It hasn't been verified by the Lebanese parliament. That's how it stands. We then came into negotiation with the Cypriots. And we took this. We received the numbers, the coordinates from the Cypriots. We said, fine, we should be good guys. What's good for the Lebanese is good for us too. And that's how we signed the agreement. A long time, we found Tamar and we found Leviathan, which made the Lebanese quite surprised. And lo and behold, they said, hey, this isn't really the point. It should be somewhere over there. That's how it stands. Now, I said publicly that given the situation, as things are done between two civilized countries, if the Lebanese don't like something that we do, let's sit and talk. They don't want to file any complaint. They go through the Hezbollah, they're making threats. And my response is very simple. We are going to defend all of our interests the way we have to do, as each nation does. At the moment, this thing is somehow, you suggested is dealt with behind scenes. Let's see where this is going to lead us to. We have your interest. By the way, it's an important thing to note. With whatever point they would like to have, they don't, until now, made any demand on Tamar, any structure, nor about Leviathan. They only wish to stop us from issuing permits in this area. But we will, unless we come to some kind of a solution. And as for the Lebanese or others in the Middle East, to try and find excuses why to set a fire. Well, they didn't need this. They have many excuses. In the Middle East, no sweat. If you want to shoot, as they say, if you want to shoot, shoot, don't talk. They talk and they shoot and they shoot and they talk. We do it our way, sir. Thank you.
Could you give us a general idea of the depth of water we're talking about that you're operating in, the depth of the gas below the ocean floor, the type deposits? I mean, we're not talking about tight gas, we're talking about regular conventional gas. And then ultimately the cost of production versus the cost of importation from your neighbors to the south. Would this gas be more costly for you to produce and use versus importing gas for your whatever use you have?
That's what would cost us if to import or to
Produce.
Well, the answer is that it is cheaper for us to produce it. Even if it is in deep water, and here, over there, it's between 1.5 and 1.8 kilometer deep, and beyond that you need to dig even further. Yet it is cheaper than to import it. It is of course much cheaper to have it from here, where the depth is around 200 meters and perhaps a little over that. But that's a size. But still, it is much cheaper.
And the type formations, are we talking about type formations? Are we talking about shale type formations? We're talking about conventional gas?
Sandstone.
Sandstone.
Thank you very much for the compliment. You think highly about me.
Of course, there's tremendous excitement about the natural gas, but in some circles, there's quite a bit of excitement about the oil shales in the Negev. I wonder if you could comment on how the ministry is looking at the oil shales, the feasibility of producing it, and whether you're going out and promoting Negev oil shales to industry.
Well, those who wish to develop oil shale in the Negev are free to submit a request for that, and we'll definitely handle it. There is a specific project at the moment, which is a pilot type of a project that is there to try and extract and develop oil shale from underground with a specific technology. It is now, by the way, debated in courts because of environmental good reasons. And we are following it very closely so that we wish to be sure that if we will eventually use this type of a technology, the environment will not be harmed. Okay, this is our first priority. And this is a pilot which is now taking place. If it will be proven to be sufficiently safe, then there are substantial quantities of oil shale that could be used for oil mostly, but I believe that also natural gas or gas is also one of the derivatives of this oil shale.
And you will be licensing the Negev for oil shale?
I think that already today it is possible to get a license in the Negev for a different technology, for the old type of technology to do. But again, today I believe once this will be, such a request will be made, then the environmental considerations will be more strict than what they were in the past.
Thank you.
One last question.
Minister, will the Gaza marine gas discovery figure into your infrastructure plans at all?
Well, the Gaza Marine, I think the problem over there was that once natural gas is produced and sold, to whom is the money going to go? We have been always prepared to see that this is developed on a condition that you could make sure that the income will not find itself in the hands of terror organizations. Now in Gaza, in that area over there, you have Gaza is here, and perhaps okay, Gaza is here. The Gaza Strip. Gaza Marine is over there. Basically, the Gaza Strip is the de facto independent state of, it's basically an independent state now governed by the Hamas extremists. To whom is the money going to go? Even if it will eventually end at the hands of someone from the Palestinian Authority, what I can read in the paper today that, for example, Mr. Salam Fayyad is not really the one who's going to be counted upon. The problem is how to see to it that the money will not end up at the hands of those who are going to use it for terrorism. That's it. But there are a number of arrangements that could solve part of the problem, but not all of it.
Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.